Easy Math, where we believe that math is as easy as its basics. Today we want to look at multiplication with integers. Right? As we go through the video, you will recognize that multiplication is not as complex as addition and subtraction with integers. Also, if you have not checked out my previous videos on addition and subtraction with integers, you can go and do so. If you have not yet subscribed, you can go back to and click the subscribe button and like, share, and make your comments. Also, if you have a topic that you're interested in, you may also make that request in the chat, and I'll see how best I can go with that request. Alright, so let's go on with the video. Some terms that we may come across while dealing with multiplication with integers. Product. This is the result of multiplying two numbers. Factors. This speaks of two numbers that are multiplied together to form a product. Multiples are obtained by multiplying an integer by the set of natural numbers. The set of natural numbers are 1, 2, 3, and you go on forever and ever. So to form multiples, you may start with, say, 2, and multiples of 2 would be like 2 times 1, 2 times 2, 2 times 3, 2 times 4, and so on. Now, for worded problems, it is good that you have a good knowledge of these terms. We're going to check out the number line in a few minutes, but first let's look at misconceptions that we might need to get rid of. Well, this time I have just one, and that is multiplying integers always give a negative result, and there might be some persons who think the contrary, that you always get a positive result. Now throw those out and pay attention, right? Get rid of them. Right, let's keep going. So the number line can be used to help us demonstrate what it is like to multiply by -1 and maybe other negative numbers too, but for now I just want to show you what -1 looks like in multiplying integers. So check this out. I'm going to start with a +5 being multiplied by a -1. Now look at what happens. We'll start with a +5, but because you're multiplying by a -1, it's like it just switches the sign of the 5, and it's now a -5. And you can see that from the demonstration there. Now, if I should go on the other side and start with a -5 and multiply that by a -1, it will also switch the side or the sign of the number, and so it will look like this. The -5, the sign will change and it will become a +5. So it's as if the -1 works like a switch, and if you multiply any number by -1, it just goes to the opposite side of the 0. Alright, so you can check out this point here. Right. Now let us see what it looks like multiplying positive integers. Multiplying positive integers, we have a +5 multiplied by a +2, we should get a +10. So in this we start with a set of 2's, and we're going to make 5 copies of that 2. Right, and everybody see that? So the 5 copies of 2, if you should check them up, you know that you get 10. That's what multiplication looks like. It is making copies of another number. Alright, so you can note quickly that when multiplying positive integers, it is just like making copies of one factor for the stated number of times, and your answer will be positive, because you know that the big question when it comes down to integers is my answer positive or is it negative? So when it is two positive numbers, two positive integers, the result turns out to be positive. Now we're going to check out multiplying a positive integer by a negative integer and see what that looks like. So we have 5 times negative 2. So in this case, we're going to end up with a negative 10. How did we end up with a negative 10? No, we ended up with a negative 10 because it's like we start with 2 negative and we should make 5 copies of that based on the problem. So let's make it 5 copies. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 copies of negative. So that ends up with 10 negative counters there. Everybody see that? Yes, you should be able to see that. All right, so from this we can take away the thought that when multiplying a positive integer by a negative, it is just like making copies of the negative factor for the stated number of times, and your answer is negative. All right, so the big question, let me touch it back, is that is my answer negative or is it positive? Yes, once there is a negative sign involved, your result is going to be negative in multiplication. All right, later on we'll say something more. Once there's an odd number of negative signs, then your answer is negative. All right, multiplying a negative integer by a positive integer. Let's see what that looks like. So we have what? A negative 5 there multiplying a positive 2. So let's go ahead. We start with a positive 2 like I did in the beginning, and we are going to make 5 copies of that. However, we have to pay attention to the negative sign on the 5. It tells me that my answer will indeed not be positives, but it will be the opposite. So the negative is saying that your answer should be the opposite of the positive. That's why we have a negative 10 there. So the negative on the 5 there tells us to switch them around. So negative 5 times 2 gives us a negative 10. All right, so let's see if this can make sense. When multiplying a negative integer by a positive integer, it is just like making copies of the positive factor for the stated number of times, and your answer is negative because you were multiplying by a negative integer, which tells you to give the opposite of whatever positive you would have had there. All right, and we are going to move forward to see what other things look like. So multiplying two negative integers, how does that look? So we have a negative 5 times a negative 2 giving us a positive 10. How does that look visually? So we start with a negative 2. We always start with a representative of the second number and then we make the copies, right? So we're going to make 5 copies of the negative 2 there. So we have 10 negative. However, the 5 has a negative on it also. So it's going to tell us to do the inverse. So whatever we have here, we have 10 negative. That's not the answer because there's a negative 5 at the front there. We should switch it and do the opposite. So we end up with a positive 10. All right. So the inverse of a negative is going to be a positive. And that's what the negative sign on the 5 is telling us. So the inverse of the negative answer is the positive. So that's why we end up with a positive 10. All right, there we go. So just grab this note. When multiplying two negative integers, it is just like making copies of the second negative factor for the stated number of times. And your answer is positive, which is the inverse of the negative copies. So in other words, the first negative integer tells us to find copies of the inverse of the second integer, right? And we have to hold that in thought. All right, so let's look at a summary. Now, the first thing is that positive times positive equals positive. Secondly, negative times negative equals positive. And then thirdly, positive times negative is equal to negative, and negative times positive is still equal to negative. So from this we can note that when multiplying integers, once the signs are the same, the result will be positive. If, however, one of the sign is different, the result will be negative, as with number 3 and 4. Well, I trust that you got something from this video, that some misconception was cleared up. Soon there will be worksheets and other help available for you. And you can just shoot me a question in the chat if you may like. I just want to encourage you today to be anxious for nothing. And somebody might say, how then do I deal with the problem? In every situation, pray, and God's peace will keep your heart. This peace from God is a peace that is even greater than you can understand, right? And if you want to check the scripture out, it's in Philippians 4, verses 6 to 7. Right, just another reminder. Thank you for watching. And remember to like, share, comment, subscribe if you have not yet done so.